Doherty, the 6'7" sophomore from East Meadow, New York.
Leadership is learned.
A starter on Coach Dean Smith's legendary 1982 Tar Heels National Championship team with Michael Jordan.
Jordan comes down with a rebound. Clears it away to Doherty. Doherty going in against Floyd. For the layup, it's good.
Leadership is earned.
Head coach at the University of North Carolina and the University of Notre Dame.
You notice Matt Doherty, he is up working every second of this ball game.
Leadership is taught.
Public speaker, author, and executive coach.
And leadership does not require a title.
This is the Rebound Podcast with Coach Matt Doherty.
Welcome to the Rebound Podcast. I'm Matt Doherty, and I'll be your host. On this podcast, we focus on the topic of leadership and overcoming adversity in an open and raw kind of way. We discuss failures and how to rebound from them. I became passionate about leadership after being forced to resign from my coaching job at the University of North Carolina in 2003. I went on a leadership journey, realized it may be the most undertaught topic in formal schooling, yet may be the most important. With me today is Michael Center. I've known Michael for 30 years. He coached and played tennis at the University of Kansas before going on to a successful stint at TCU and then the University of Texas. He had massive success at every stop as a coach and player. He was a 3-time Big 12 Coach of the Year. Michael is a husband and father. Michael, welcome to the Rebound Podcast.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah. Michael, I'm just going to get to it. You're one of the most respected tennis coaches, and as the head coach of University of Texas, one of the biggest brands in the country, you're getting ready to leave for work one day, and the front door gets busted down. What happened?
Well, Matt, that was about 2 years ago, March the 12th, 2019. Today is the first day I've even publicly spoken at all about this topic. You're the first person I've even addressed this with, but we had a match that evening versus Rice. I heard a knock on my door, not a knock, a crashing noise against my door. I thought someone had been seriously injured the way they were screaming and yelling. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I rushed to my door, hearing my name screamed, and I opened the door, feeling like it was going to be knocked down. And within seconds, I was shackled at my ankles and handcuffed in front of my family and taken to jail. And they wouldn't tell me what was going on. I think I'd had one speeding ticket in my life. I'd never had any NCAA rules violations. I didn't know what was happening. And I was put in a cell that day for about 6 hours, not knowing anything. And really has changed my life. I went from being the coach of a team that was ranked number 2 in the country, and that team ended up winning the national championship that year. We had just opened a new facility about a year and a half earlier. And I was on top of the world in a lot of ways. Had a great team, great family, great life, and everything changed.
Michael, as you were being arrested, did you have any inkling it was involving the academic bribery scandal?
No, I had no idea. I had no idea at the time. When I exited, when I had to go in front of a judge that day and they released me on bail, there were probably 25, 30, maybe up to 40 people clamoring in front of this window, taking my picture like paparazzi and screaming my name. And I, at that point, realized something was going on that was much bigger than I could have ever imagined. But at that point, when this initially happened, I had no idea.
Even when you were being released on bail, you had no idea?
once I was released, I had an attorney show up and tell me what was going on.
Okay.
So I did know once I walked out that what the situation was, but I had no idea the magnitude of it. I had no idea that it was a national story. I didn't know any of these other people. I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah. Well, let's just give the audience an overview of what we're referring to, okay? This is the NCAA academic admissions bribery scandal that started, as you said, in 2019, that was at the direction of Rick Singer and a Martin Fox. They would entice coaches, basically of non-revenue sports, to admit students as athletes so they could use a partial scholarship or just gain admission to a university in return for some kind of funds. Is that fair to say, Michael?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I'm not going to go into all the details about it. Essentially what happened with me in an overview, and I think this is well known, in 2012, the University of Texas, a bond was put forth to build a medical school on the campus. We didn't have our own branch of a medical school, and a bond passed. Michael Dell gave money, and all of a sudden, everyone's happy we're going to build a medical school. And then about 2 months later, I'm told, oh, by the way, it's going to be, your tennis courts will be torn down. And you will have to have a new facility built. So I was told we had a $15 million budget to replace the tennis center coming from the school. We decided on the spot, the location, plans were drawn up. The gentleman who hired me was kind of a legendary figure. A guy named DeLoss Dodds was the athletic director. He departs in 2013, and Mac Brown, who's now the coach at North Carolina, is asked to leave, and all of a sudden there are a lot of changes. A new athletic director comes in, and he calls a meeting with about 35 to 40 people and says, you no longer have $15 million. When you come up with $10 million, we'll put a shovel in the ground. The woman who was supervising me says the same thing. I never had a private meeting. I never was given this information between myself and the administration. And so I set out on a journey to raise $10 million along with the foundation, and it was not going well. And I got a call one day, and we got involved in this thing. I thought that I was transparent with it.
How so? How when you say you were transparent with it, transparent to whom?
With the administration.
And how so? How explain?
Well, the difference between my situation and a lot of situations is when you bring in student athletes as a walk-on at a lot of schools, they are coded and they move through the system designated as an athlete. But that didn't work that way at the University of Texas. You had to sign what was called a national letter of intent. And so whether it was Michael Jordan or Matt Doherty or Kevin Durant or a book scholarship, you're vetted through the same process on a national letter of intent. And so this young man came through on a national letter of intent, and I felt like everyone was very aware and documented that he would not play tennis.
So he was going. You were using a slot for him, an academic slot, so he could get.
It wasn't even really an academic slot. I was foregoing a spot on my team, a recruitable spot, a book scholarship,
a full scholarship.
No, a book scholarship.
A book scholarship. Gotcha.
Which is just 2% of it. We operate on equivalency.
Yep.
See, we only have 4.5 scholarships.
Right. Yep.
And so we operate, and he signed as a books. Everybody, that was public knowledge, and there's a process that you have to go through where you're vetted, where you're signed off on by numerous people in the department, all the way up to the athletic director, and
so he signed as a book scholarship tennis player, even
Correct.
though everyone knows he's not a tennis player.
Correct.
And
to
the
become
reason
to become the basketball manager.
to become the basketball manager.
Now, the basketball program had asked me through this guy to help them, and they spoke to me often about it. And
why couldn't the basketball program just?
Well, they only offer, basketball is a head count sport. They only offer full scholarships.
Yeah.
You're not going to give someone like this a full scholarship.
So was the hook to get this kid into school? Was he not a good enough student to get in academically?
Yeah, all these kids that ended up going to these schools were not qualified. They were decent students, but to be admitted through a university like Texas or North Carolina or Stanford, it's difficult. And it's becoming more and more difficult.
Yes.
And that's part of the problem is, parents, we could go on and on about this, but you send your kids to schools, you get the tutors, you do all the things, and then you've given money to the school and they say, no, you can't be admitted, and it's caused issues throughout the country. And I think we all know that people have been admitted in various ways through the years.
Easier at private schools than public schools.
Yeah,
because,
easier at private school than a public school.
Yeah.
But it's happened across the country in various sports or through favors or whatever. And so I didn't feel like I was doing anything wrong
because it was going through a system where everybody had a sign off on it, from the basketball coaches to the athletic administration, and there's a paper trail.
There's a paper trail.
So what went wrong? What did
I accepted money at the end? At the very end, I made a terrible choice. There were some things that were said to me that were, I can't go into detail, but they were beyond inappropriate.
In terms of a threatening manner?
Threatening manner. And I felt like, why am I being asked to raise this much money to be able to do my job?
Okay, so the threats came from the administration.
Yeah.
Yep. So you felt the pressure that you had to succeed and you needed to raise money.
I needed to raise money, and I felt, this, anybody who's ever coached knows this. You're told you're part of a family, but at the end of the day, you need to win.
Yeah, I think I've been there, Michael.
I think I've been there as well as anybody, Matt.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, obviously football and basketball are more high profile, but at a school like Texas, I felt like I could not win and be successful and do my job without tennis courts.
Yeah, that would help, right?
Yeah, that helps.
You kind of need tennis courts and maybe some rackets and a few balls.
You need some balls, and not just not just in a field. I mean, we were literally playing in a field where the courts had been built in 1970 with fences that couldn't support a windscreen, where we had a little portable trailer where we had a little porta potty in there, and we would drive 15 minutes, 20 minutes over there. And then in the mornings we would go to a public facility to do our private lessons, and we would go all over town to play matches wherever we could find courts. And I felt like I was going to fail. I felt like I couldn't do my job. I couldn't succeed. And I became very anxious. I'm going to be honest. I became very nervous and very anxious that we were not going to be able to keep up. And at the time, the Big 12 was incredibly strong in tennis. In 2015, 3 of the final 4 teams came out of our conference.
Wow.
Baylor, TCU, and Oklahoma. And we weren't one of them. And for me to keep up with that, it wasn't like we were playing against, these in a really weak we were expected to be at minimum in the top 10.
Right. So let me go back to this young man that you give a scholarship to. So now it's even hurts you down. Now a part of a scholarship you can't give to an actual player.
Right.
But now his father is going to donate money to the tennis facility. Was that the understanding?
Well, there was some money given to me that I gave to benefit the tennis center. I made the mistake of accepting some money, and then I passed on the father's name to the foundation, and the father became one of our largest donors to the tennis facility through the foundation. I just gave him the father's name and number. I wasn't trying to hide anything.
Right.
I was, and then he had to go meet with the compliance director, the young man, and he became an employee of the athletic department. He was working on the basketball staff. I mean, I when they tried to approach me again with this, I said, no, I don't need to get involved with this. The athletic director was soon fired, and a new administration came in and said, we're building you tennis courts. So I didn't have the threat or the pressure of raising money anymore, and I just had moved on, and now I had a place to recruit to and rebuild the team, and we went from, a top 25 team to a national championship team, and in large part because we had a place to play.
Yeah, it blows. It would blow anybody that knows of college athletics knows that Texas and Ohio State probably have the two largest budgets and brands in the country, and it's hard to believe that you had to practice in a field in outdated courts, and you had to raise $10 million for for courts for your team. That was probably not something you ever expected you had to do at the University of Texas.
No, I never anticipated. Part of the deal going there was, when I was at Kansas, when we were together at Kansas, that was part of the deal. I raised money to operate the program. But when I went to Texas, I was told you don't have to raise money. You have a budget, you have to stay within your budget, but that's not part of the deal. And I had helped. We'd built an indoor facility. Part of the problem is in 2013, we opened up an $8 million indoor facility. Mm-hmm. So a lot of our donors, and I had been involved in that a little bit, but they had given. And so when the university tore down the outdoor facility, people were tired of giving, and they didn't think that was their responsibility to give anymore. That was the school's responsibility to rebuild the courts. And the foundation was trying, but they were striking out, and I was the one that
it fell on. It's either you do it, or you do it, or you're going to get fired.
One that knew the people. Yeah, I had the relationships with the tennis people.
Yeah,
I'd been there a long time, and so the people that were interested in tennis knew me.
So let's go back now. This scandal involves some heavy names. I mean, Rick Singer and Martin Fox are at the probably top of the pyramid, but some of the people that are involved, Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman, two actresses in Hollywood that had to spend time in jail, and this took over national news for months. You're at the top of the tennis world. You're getting back. You have your family. All of a sudden, you're in shackles. You're out on bail. What do you tell your wife and kids?
Well, when I got home that night, I think we were all in shock, beyond shock. And we got together, and I told my family, I said, your lives will not change because of this. I promise you. I promise you. I made a commitment that I would do anything and everything in my power as a human being to let my children and my wife continue to live the same lives. You're going to go to school. My boys one's going to college next year. The next one will go the following year. You continue to go to high school. You continue to do your thing, play your sports, do well in school. You're going to go to college. You're going to have a great life. my wife has a job that she loves, and you keep doing your job, and we will work through this. I was devastated, but I tried to keep the mindset that we would be okay. But deep down, I was trembling and frightened in a way that I'd never been frightened. I couldn't even breathe at times.
What was okay, that was the night of March 12th, 2019.
Right.
What's next for Michael Center? Do you get fired, forced to resign? Do you go to court? When did you go to, jail?
Yeah. Well,
what was the timeline?
The next day, it was spring break, and we had a scheduled trip. My family was going skiing, and we had a match on Thursday against Ohio State. They were ranked number 1, and we were 2 or 3. They were the only team that beaten us. We had a match that night. We were going to play, and then I was going to go out and join them for a couple of days. Instead, I put them on a plane on the next day, and I'm fired the next day in about 30 seconds. So I've been there 19 years, and in 30 seconds it was over. I get a phone call from the 2 administrators, and they tell me, you're done. And I have nothing. And so I put my family on a plane on Wednesday, and Thursday, this attorney that had come to meet me, who I didn't know, lives in Houston. I drive to Houston. I hire him that day. I go home, and the team, we have this Longhorn network. We play Ohio State, and we just crushed Ohio State. So now we're going to be number 1 or 2 in the country. And the next day, my brother calls me and tells me they were talking about me on the Today Show.
Oh, God.
And I didn't even know about it. And so I had to call, and I had to change attorneys that day. He'd gone on without my permission, without me knowing.
The attorney went on the Today Show and started talking. So he probably just wanted it for publicity.
He wanted some publicity. I didn't even really know him. He didn't know much about me. He spoke about my case. He said things that I didn't. I've never watched the video, but my brother told me it was inappropriate. It was just not good. And so I was literally on my floor on that Friday morning after my brother told me this, and I couldn't breathe. No one was home. I was laying there, and I had a panic attack, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I could not breathe. I couldn't move. I was crying and panting, and I didn't know what to do. Now I didn't have an attorney. I knew I was going to have to change attorneys. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. I'd lost my job. I was in a full out panic, and at that point I was suicidal. I wanted to kill myself. I knew that I didn't have it in me to do it, but if a bus had was coming at me, I wasn't going to get out of the way. I wanted to just die. And I ended up going to a psychiatrist, started getting on medication. So in 3 days, I go from being the head coach of one of the best teams in the country at one of the biggest schools in the country to wanting to kill myself over making an error that I regret. But I never was trying to even take someone's spot that was applying to school, and never entered my mind. I would never have done that. I was giving up a spot on my own team.
Right.
And then the NCAA did a full investigation and ruled it wasn't even a violation.
Why wasn't it a violation?
Because we followed protocol.
Right.
I told them what was going on.
So the NCAA says you didn't file, you didn't violate any rules.
I didn't even violate a rule.
So how could the school fire you? Could you go back to this?
Because I was arrested, I guess, and I accepted money at the end, and they said it was a bribe, and I'm stuck. I'm fired. I'm out of a job.
How much money did you accept?
$60,000, which I gave probably $45,000 to $50,000 of it away.
To whom?
Mainly to homeless people and to charities. It was not for me. I kept some, and that was wrong. There's no doubt. I paid tax on the whole thing, and I paid a penalty on it, and I did that on my own. No one asked me to do that, but later on, but that was still wrong of me to take it. I regret it. I got anxious. I got angry that they were asking me to come up with this kind of money, and this guy said, you deserve some, and I said, yeah, you're right. I'm tired of these things happening. And I'd walk up to, for 4 years. I had it for 4 years, and I would give it to, we have a pretty big homeless population in Austin. And I would just walk up and give someone $500 and give someone, and I did it all the time. And it was wrong. It's still wrong. And I take full responsibility for that. That is on me. There's no reason that I should have allowed anyone to make me feel that angry, or that I lost my poise, or as a leader of people that I buckled and I made a poor decision. But I did. And the first thing I told myself when I was sitting in prison that day is, you told your team for your entire life, if you do something wrong, you own it, you tell the truth, and it will work out.
You know, you and I have talked a lot over the last couple of months. You know, what you preach to your team, what you preach to your own children, now you're on the hot seat. All right? You're being asked by the law, did you do it? And you say you owned up to it.
Well, when you coach, you know this, Matt, kids 18 to 22 will make mistakes, some more serious than others. And I would always bring the guys in and I'd say, just tell me the truth. And we'll work through this. If you don't tell me the truth, it will not end well. So it's your choice. We all have choices in life. And I said, you know what? I told my team my whole life to tell the truth. I better tell the truth and everything and own it. And that's what I did. And so the day they got me, I said, whatever this is, I'm telling the truth. And I told the truth. Didn't work out very well for me, but I told the truth because that's what I told myself. And many times through this whole situation, I would refer to, what would I tell the team? What would I tell one of my players?
It's pretty powerful.
What would I expect of them? And I have to expect that of myself.
Pretty powerful. Pretty powerful. If you had to do it again, would you tell the truth?
Now that I know the system, I don't know how much it benefits you. I can tell you that. I still wouldn't want to lie because I don't think that's the way to handle things in life. But I think there's a reason you see all these people in life and society and politicians just deny everything.
What?
Because telling the truth didn't help me at all.
Tell me when you say the system, talk about that a little bit further.
Well, I knew nothing about the criminal justice system. Absolutely nothing. I mean, my knowledge of it was you'd see someone had gotten in trouble and they went to jail, and my thought process, well, they must have done something wrong, and they shut the door, and you didn't really know what was going on behind the scenes, and you just accepted it. And I think that's what most people do in this society that have never been around that criminal justice system. But what what I came to find out was the challenge of finding out, everything. And if you deny it and you make it hard to prove certain things, people get away with things and they move on. And I just never thought that way. I always thought that you got to own up to it. You've got to be honest and you've got to tell the truth. And when I did that, and once I said I accepted this money and this is exactly what I took, and I'm going to pay the tax and I'm going to do this, and I should have done that earlier. That was I own that as well. But I did, and I paid the penalty. But I don't think that benefited me at the end at all. And when I was sentenced, they recommended 0 to 6 months, and they gave me the full 6 months. And so I got, if you compare my sentence to other people's in the case, I got hit pretty hard, punished pretty severely. And, that's a whole nother experience that really impacted me. That was more than challenging.
Well, let's talk about that. How does this work? What happened? You're in the courtroom. The judge, bangs the gavel and says guilty, and then they come.
This is how it works. Once you get arrested and you plead guilty to that something, you basically have given your life away to the federal government. You have no ability to really do anything. It's hard to get a job. It's hard to work. So they put you on what was called a pretrial, which meant I'm waiting, and they set a date of October 30th. So I'm thinking I'm going to go and see a judge on October 30th. But as it turns out, they can change that date whenever they want, however they want, with no reason or explanation.
And where was that trial?
So I have to go to Boston, Massachusetts, which is a heck of a trip for me. And so I'd already gone up there twice, and I'm set to go to Boston. And then I just get an email. Nope, October 30th been pushed to February 4th.
Wow.
So now I'm in limbo for another 4 or 5 months. Then February 4th comes, my family, some friends, we all have tickets. I'm planning on going there. And I get an email 3 or 4 days ahead. Nope, we've decided to push it to February 24th.
Wow.
So you're like on a yo-yo. Your emotions are up and down, and you have no control. You can't say, well, that's not fair.
Right.
What do you mean?
And that's all. That's almost a year without pay, too.
Almost a year without anything. Without you can't do anything. You're just basically you're kind of you're not in jail, but you feel like you're in jail.
Could you leave your house? Could you travel?
At that point, I can leave my house. I could travel. I just had to tell someone where I was going. But I can function. Right. But I'm not really free to just.
You can function, but you're not functional.
I'm not free just to go do whatever I want to do.
So let's go to the pretrial. You finally get to pretrial, and then I think everybody wants.
I would go meet with this guy once a month, and I would go and we would talk about what was going on, and he was a very nice gentleman, and he kept me abreast. But the thing about these systems is they don't really communicate. No one really knows what the other arm is doing. It'd be like running a team, and none of your assistant coaches know anything, and anything can happen at any time. So there's no real structure. So you're just kind of sitting there waiting. And then finally I'm on what's called pretrial for about a year. And I show up to Boston on February 24th. And I walk into this room, and it was the most horrifying experience of my life. I've been told that the recommendation now for the prosecution has been 0 to 6 months. So I'm hopeful that it'll be 0, obviously, or I'm preparing myself for a month, or like Felicity Huffman got 2 weeks or a couple months, and the judge never looked at me once. He never looked at me. And he asked me to say something, and you're told just to say, I'm sorry. You don't really give any story or explanation because that makes you sound like you're not remorseful.
Mm-hmm.
And you just say you're sorry. And he says to me, quote, you impugn the system. And we're going to teach everyone basically not to do this. And I recommend 6 months.
Wow.
And I felt like he would have wanted to give me more. I mean, he was, but he didn't really know me. It was really a bizarre experience because
right.
He didn't really know me. He didn't know. They don't really dig into what happened with me. It becomes what they call a conspiracy, where they just kind of throw everybody into one bucket and they treat everyone like they did the same thing. And you want to just stand up and shout, no, I this was a one-time thing, and these things and you want to kind of give your side of the story, but you really can't. And because that could cost you more. And you just say, I'm sorry. And he says 6 months, and I almost collapsed. I literally almost fell out of my chair.
Were your wife and kids there?
My wife was there. My children were not there. I had a few friends there for support, but I was devastated, and that's an understatement.
So they say 6 months. You're in Boston. Do they put you in cuffs right there? You have to fly home and report?
I go home, and I sign something, and I'm to report April the 6th. Well, everybody knows what happened in March of 2019.
Right.
COVID.
Right.
So all of a sudden, COVID becomes everything, and it's all that people are talking about. It's obviously a worldwide pandemic, and I have to call on March the 19th to find out where they're putting me. I've requested to be close to my home, hopeful, that it'll be easy for my wife to come see me or my children. And they say, COVID, I call, and they say, you're going to Three Rivers, Texas. I thought I was going to go to Bastrop, which was about 45 minutes away. Three Rivers is about 2.5 hours away, south of me, down between San Antonio and Corpus Christi, and really the middle of nowhere. I'd never even heard of it. I've lived in Texas for over 20 years. I've never heard of Three Rivers. And I said to the guy at the end, well, is there a COVID protocol? How are you handling COVID? Well, you're going to be quarantined in a 10 by 10 cell for 14 days.
So basically isolation.
I'm basically isolated, away from anyone and everyone, in a medium security prison where they have like high offenders, it's murderers. I'm supposed to be in what's called a camp, like where you can walk around outside and mm-hmm. do your thing. And well, I said, I don't know if I can do that. I'm completely claustrophobic. It's one of my issues. I'm very claustrophobic. And he's like, well, you'll just get arrested. I said, well, what can I bring? You can bring a pair of glasses, and you can wear your wedding band. So I show up on April the 6th. I'm scared to death that I'm going into this cell. They're going to shut this door. I don't know if I get out to exercise.
Let me interrupt you. Did you drive there by yourself?
My wife and my sister-in-law took me. My wife's sister.
How was that drive?
It was at that point. I'm trying to mentally just prepare myself. I'm trying to just convince myself it's going to be okay as best I can. Mm. But I'm scared to death because I don't like confined areas. Mm. And I get there. I meet with a psychologist. He asked me some very bizarre questions. I'm like, no. And then he got to the point, have you ever thought about killing yourself? And I said, I've got to be honest.
Right. Yeah. Got to be honest.
Got to be honest. I got to tell the truth. That's the only way
Right.
I can be if I'm going to do this the way I told my team to do it. And I said, yeah, when this first happened, I'm honest. But I only have 6 months now, and I would not do that. But yeah, I'm nervous. Well, I'm going to put you on suicide watch. Once again, telling the truth did not help, because now suicide watch, which I had no idea what it meant going into a isolated cell with a concrete bed. The air conditioning unit was broken. It was 85 to 90 degrees. They strip you naked and they turn the lights on.
So wait a second. A concrete bed, like no mattress?
On top of it was a removable 1-inch foam mattress with a pillow sewn in on the top. But the bed is made of concrete, and they have steel latches on the side of the bed, which if someone acts up, they could strap you down.
Oh gosh. And they don't want any material that you could create
hurt yourself.
A noose or strangle yourself.
Strangle yourself. So they take all your clothes. They give me a vest.
You're naked.
Naked. I don't even have my underwear on, and I have a vest that's Velcro. There was a one size fits all that they would have given you the same one they gave me. You're 6'7", I'm 6'1". They would have given it to a guy 5'5", and it doesn't fit. It's heavy, and so I take it off. So I'm literally standing in this cell, completely naked, dripping sweat. I mean, absolutely dripping. It's 85, 88 degrees in there.
And the lights on.
And the lights are on. And I pull that mattress, and there's a fan, and I knock on the door, and I said, could you put that fan close to the door? And I laid down and placed my head at the base of the door, and there was about a 1/2 inch crack underneath the door, and I just was trying to breathe the air. And then I would put my feet on the toilet because of the pipes and the water coming through, it was a little cooler in temperature to try to reduce my body temperature. And I was there for 48 straight hours.
Wow.
That's how I started.
Due to time, we have about 18 minutes. These details are just mind-blowing. I feel like I'm reading some novel. About a year prior, you're one of the top coaches, coaching one of the top teams, living in a nice community, kids are doing well, wife has a good job, and a year later, you're in prison on suicide watch, butt naked in isolation.
That's correct.
All right. Let's just talk about, in a minute, and won't do it justice, how did you get through those 6 months?
Well, I made a list, and I would write and journal every day. And I would tell myself, once again, what would you say to your team? And I told myself, this is just time. This is part of your story. Be resilient. Not just be resilient where you get knocked down and get back up, but be resilient where when you get knocked down, get back up with more strength and more purpose and more fight and more determination. And I read about 50 or 60 books. I told you about that Man's Search for Meaning. I read twice. I read Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom. And I just read a lot of books, and I wrote. And because of COVID, I was not allowed to go outside much. But when I did, I would exercise and walk. And then the last 42 days I was there, we all got sick. I had COVID, tested positive, and so I hadn't seen or stepped outside in 6 straight weeks. So when I got out, they put me in this halfway house, which was to help me reacclimate into society, which was another difficult 5 weeks.
Whoa! So you go from 6 months in jail to a halfway house for
4.5 months in jail.
Okay. To
another 5 weeks in a halfway house, and then I had what's called 2 weeks of home confinement, where I have an ankle brace on me. So that's what made the 6 months. So I had the full 6 months, but not all of it in the prison. Only 4.5 months in the prison.
All right. You get home. They take the ankle bracelet off.
Right.
What's going through your mind? What's next for Michael Center?
Well, I wanted to sleep because at the halfway house, they made me get up at 4:00 in the morning every day.
Why?
That's when they serve breakfast.
4 a.m.
4 a.m. So I slept a little bit. I started calling some people. I want to work.
Well, speaking of calls, Michael, who was the first person, non-family related, that called you that made it, you remember, that made an impact?
Well, through this whole situation, I had 4 or 5 people that would call me every day that, during the pre-trial, and then when I was out, and then after I got home, so for that year of waiting to be sentenced, and then even in prison, I would get some limited phone calls and I would call them, but I'd have to start with my college coach. He called me every day.
The impact of coaches, the impact of sport. You thinking about your players when you're being sentenced and telling the truth, and your coach in turn is calling you every day to help you get through the darkest time of your life.
Every day. And I wouldn't have made it without him. I was a freshman in 1982. And I have a couple friends that former coaches that were amazing. And I would like to shout out to my peers, the people I coached against. I received about 500 letters in those 4.5 months when I was in prison. And many of them were from my coaching peers. And they really lifted my spirits and impacted me so much. And they helped me so much. But I have a friend whose son was tragically injured in a golf cart accident. We coached and played against each other. We speak still to this day, pretty much every day. And the guy that was the coach at USC for many years, great coach and great person. We speak a lot. And, I just had a childhood friend. The guy showed up 3 days after this all happened, showed up at my house. So someone I knew from since I was in kindergarten. And so I was really, really lucky. I had some really great friends and people that reached out to me. And then then my father got sick. And then my father passed away.
What did he pass away while you were in prison, or?
No, 3 months after I got out. So I got to go see him.
What did you say to your dad? What did he say to you?
I just felt so bad that I put him through this. He worried about me so much. And when I went to see him, I have limitations on my travel, and with COVID and everything, it was hard to go right away. And then I went to go see him, and he died 5 days later. And so that's been really hard too, because I feel I have a lot of guilt. about that I put my dad through this. And then he died.
What part of your faith, you're Jewish, how did your faith come into play during this time?
Well, one person I leaned on a lot was my rabbi, and he talked to me about forgiving myself a lot, which has been really difficult for me to do.
I talk about that a great deal.
And so he's been a real strong presence. I wouldn't say that I'm the most active member of the congregation, but I've always identified with being Jewish, and I've always identified with something larger than myself, which I think helps people through times like this to feel like there's something bigger than you and more important, a bigger picture, so to speak. But I'm still working on it. But that's where my faith is I try to lean on that notion that I need to forgive myself.
What are your biggest triggers? I talk about in the book Rebound the triggers, and they're so hard. For me, it's watching the University of North Carolina play, Notre Dame play, the NCAA tournament. What are the big triggers for Michael Center?
Well, I think, when you coach, and this, it becomes such a part of your identity on who you are, rightly or wrongly. And because most people become coaches, when we became coaches, when I met you, you were a restricted earnings coach.
Yeah.
Making $15,000-$16,000 a year.
That's right.
I was the head women's coach at the University of Kansas, making $18,000 a year.
That's why you always bought me lunch.
That's right. I was making more than you. And so I didn't become a coach to make money. I became a coach because I love being around the players, and I love being around my peers, and I love the competition, and we've talked, it's like a drug.
Yep.
It's like a drug. It's like you can't find a high, and you probably can't find many lows like coaching.
That's right.
The thrill of the victory is definitely true, and the agony of defeat became more and more difficult for me. So when I see people get excited in athletics, or, around here, it's all about Texas, and I see all these, the coaches come on TV every night, the basketball coaches or the baseball or volleyball. And I know still a lot of them, and I see the joy in people's faces and the excitement. And that's a trigger for me. It hurts because I know I have to turn away.
Yeah.
I can't watch the NCAA basketball tournament.
Yeah.
I have some anger towards basketball right now.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go into all the details, but I grew up in Kansas. I love basketball, and I can't even watch the NCAA basketball tournament. So that's definitely a trigger for me.
And you're obviously referring to the fact that the player you helped admit into UT was, working for the basketball program. What are you doing to rebound from a devastating setback? How are you doing it? What's your process? And are you on track?
Well, right now I've been working and consulting and trying to coach people. And my goal is to try to impact more people than I even did as a collegiate coach. And if I can help them, that will hopefully help me.
What's your message? What's your message to them?
Well, we've talked about, your line of turn your mess into your message.
Yeah.
Is that you can be resilient. And when things are not going your way, when you really are overwhelmed, and there's so many things in life that can overwhelm you, whether it's a family member that suffered from COVID, or you've lost your job, or the list can go on and on. How do you handle that? And my way of handling it is I keep telling myself, get back up with more strength and determination than you did before, and keep going one day at a time, one step at a time, one moment at a time, and stop worrying about the future and try to not focus on the past. And if I cannot focus on the past and not try to always look too far in the future and just do the best that I can each and every day, I can have good days, and I can start to string good days together and move forward. But I still sometimes look backwards too much. Mm-hmm. And I still worry about my future too much. Mm-hmm. And those are the two things that I've got to continue to work on and get better. Today's my birthday, 57 today. And so I'm like, come on, you don't want to spend the rest of your life worrying about these things. Enjoy. You have a lot of positives, and be grateful for what I do have.
Amen, Michael. I just want to really thank you for sharing. We learned a lot. Leadership is a learned behavior. You're a leader whether you are a parent, a coach, a business owner, or a friend. We all lead in some way, shape, or form. Thanks for listening. I welcome any and all feedback. You can reach me on Twitter. My handle is @DohertyMatt.